So good evening, everybody, and welcome to the special City Council meeting for South Burlington on February 6th on 2025, and it is 3:32 p.m. We will start our meeting with item 1 of the agenda, which is the Pledge of Allegiance. And Elizabeth, will you lead us, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. We will now move to item 2, which is instructions on exiting the building in case of an emergency and review of technology options with Jesse Baker, City Manager.
Thank you. So thanks for those who are in the room. If there's an emergency during the meeting, you can go out on either side of the rear of the auditorium and then turn left or right to get outside. For those participating electronically, thank you for joining us as well. If you would like to be recognized during any item on the agenda, you can turn your camera on and the chair will call on you, or you can send me a message in the chat and I will have the chair call on you. Other than that, we are not monitoring the chat for content.
Thank you, Jesse. Item 3 is agenda review. This is where we look for additions, deletions, or changes in the order of agenda items, and I'm going to ask that we remove item 8 because we did that yesterday. Does everybody agree with that? No need to do it again unless you want to. All right, so So item 8 was consider entering into executive session pursuant to 1 VSA 313A3 for the purpose of discussing the yearly performance evaluation of the city manager. So, no. So even though that was a great meeting, right? We're not going to do it again. So we're striking item 8. Any other changes to the agenda? We're noting that Elizabeth has to leave by 4:45. Laura, you're here for the duration?
I'm here for the duration.
Okay, good. Item 4, which is comments and questions from the public that are not related to today's agenda. And Mr. Doyle has illuminated his camera, and so I think he wants to speak.
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
It's a little low. Need some more.
What?
No, it's on our side. It's on our side. Maybe some more volume on the speakers. Hold on.
Can you keep talking, Ryan?
Keep talking, Ryan.
I can keep talking.
That's good.
I can.
Perfect.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, 2 short comments. I want to remind you guys that if you're doing appointments, you should definitely declare if any of them have made political contributions to you. That has been an issue in the past, and now that we have a stricter code of ethics, then we should be bringing those forward immediately. And the other thing is, I wish item 8 had not been done last night because I wanted to say some good things about Jesse. I think the stability that Jesse's been providing is really good for our city, and I won't go into depth since you've already discussed it, but she's doing a great job despite how much criticism I give. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle.
Thank you, Ryan.
Andrew, welcome to the meeting. I see you didn't bother to ride your bicycle down today.
Yeah.
Need to put on
I
your...
had a little trouble getting in, but I'm here. Right.
All right, any other comments from the public? Probably not, since the only people here are... Okay, good. Okay, so we're going to go to item number 5, which is hold interviews for committee appointments to the Natural Resources and Conservation Committee. We have 4 applications in front of us today, and everybody's here. We have Noah, Fran, Jessica is in the audience, right? And Jean is online, right? Okay, that's probably Jean's iPad, I would assume, right? All right, good. So in our packet, we have an order of applicants, so why don't we just use that? All right, so we'll start with Fran McDonald. Fran, are you there? Can you turn on your camera and your microphone? There you are. Can you talk?
Here.
Keep talking.
I'm here.
Okay, we can hear you. How's it going today?
It's good since I don't have to drive.
You're letting electrons do your traveling for you. Good.
Right.
Right. Well, thanks for applying for this position. You want to give us a little background about your history of volunteering with the city, please?
Yeah, so with the city, I was on the planning commission for, I guess, almost a year and a half when we worked on the city plan 2024 and on the land development regulations.
Okay, and any other positions you've had in the city at all?
No, that's it for the
Okay.
city.
Okay. And what piques your interest about being on the NRCC?
So I think in my work in the neighborhood where I live in South Point, when I was on the homeowners association board, we at that time was interim zoning and the discussions about the habitat blocks, the original development proposed by Ellen Long, and I got, because I was the spokesman for the association, I spent quite a bit of time looking at the land development regulations and also the habitat blocks and studies on open space throughout the city. So that kind of led me to applying for the planning commission, which I did, and since that time, I've also joined the board of the South Burlington Land Trust to kind of keep my interest and hand in things related to the natural resources. And since moving here, I've been always interested in and involved in things related to the natural resources within South Burlington. So that's why I'm interested in continuing that.
And what specific things is the NRCC working on that you would like to participate in?
Well, I think there are a couple of things. One is the goal, I guess, from City Plan 2024, all of the streams within the city of South Burlington are all the watersheds are listed as impaired. And I think the work that the Natural Resources Committee does is to look at stormwater planning. And I did attend the meeting yesterday afternoon or last night, and my interest in that one was because they were talking about the Adelphia, what do they call it, scoping study for the wetland and stormwater retention, which is a building now that's Xfinity. But that includes the I think Potash Brook area and trying to clean up that particular spot around that Xfinity building. But it turned out in the discussion that there's a lot of stormwater work that's going on along Potash Brook. So I think that's one area. And then I think another one is, and I think the applications for community gardens, I think that just closed. And I think when I remember from the city plan discussion that I think there's about 50 of those garden plots, but I think there's about 100 applicants. So I think looking at where we can expand those and try to get more areas for residents to garden in the city is another area.
Okay. Other councilors have questions?
Good to see you, Fran. Glad to have you
Yeah,
at the
good.
meeting last night. And I will disclose that Fran contributed to my campaign. And I've never seen anywhere that says I need to do that. And I can declare that it in no way impacts my decision-making. I can say no to you as easily as I can anybody, Fran. So,
Thank you.
Have you looked into it all, or are aware of the open space and Parks and Rec master planning process that is underway, and how could you see contributing to that?
Well, I think that that is probably split between the Parks and Recreation and the NRCC, but I think the NRCC would play a big role in that because you're looking at the open spaces, how those might be, I guess, changed for active recreation or maybe sports, and the impacts that those might have on the different watersheds within the city. So I think the NRCC plays a big role in commenting on how the open spaces in the city are used.
Thank you.
Mike?
Yeah, good question, Lori. I think that's a strategic one. I have a question. For all applications, we request that people address, the different sort of core aspects of our city plan, and one of them is about equity and access through our community to all our services or good places such as open spaces or rec parks. How do you see that factoring into your decision when you look at the issue of nature conservation in our city?
Well, I think it's overall the climate impacts, whether it be more rain or more wind, the areas that might flood are going to be some areas of the city, areas that are impacted by other environmental changes. I think we have to look at each area of the city and how it would be impacted from different changes in our climate, or how our resources, the resources that we have, how they're used and how they're spread out. And I think that each part of the city has different conditions, and they're impacted in different ways. But I think we have to look at the local community and see where they're being impacted and how they're impacted, and look only at that and not apply something from a different quadrant of the city to that's not applicable.
Thank you.
Elizabeth, any questions?
No, I'm pretty familiar with Fran's work, and I applaud all your volunteerism, Fran. Thank you for stepping up again. Can you hear me okay?
I'm getting it a little garbled.
Okay. Well, just thank you for your volunteer work. I'm familiar that you're very active, so thanks. I don't have any additional questions.
Okay. Thank you, Elizabeth.
What about Andrew? I can't see Andrew right now. I don't know if he has a hand.
I don't have questions. Thanks.
I didn't hear it. Say it again.
I don't have questions.
No questions.
Thanks.
Okay. Fran, do you have any closing statements you want to make, or you're familiar with how often the committee meets, right?
Right. Yep. They meet just once a month. So
Okay. And you have time for that, I would suppose. And
yes.
And you attended one meeting yesterday, right? Was it your first time going to one of those meetings?
No, about the third or fourth time, but I think the last meeting that I went to prior to this one was probably 3 or 4 months ago.
Okay.
And I've been to some before that, but I usually look at the agendas and see what might be coming up that's of interest, and then either try to attend, usually in person.
Okay. Well, thanks for applying. And you know the process, right? At one point, once we've gone through all the interviews, we'll go into executive session, make a selection, and after we come out, then we'll vote on it, right?
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next,
Do you know, just a question, are the applicants aware that we have interviews that are going to happen at the next council meeting as well, so it won't be a quick decision? Just
Yes,
want to
they
make
were-
sure people know that.
They were given the opportunity to participate in either meeting.
So next we have Jean Hunt.
Does that work?
I can hear you. Are you going to use your camera tonight? Today?
Yeah, let me find it here.
Okay.
Why does it keep going?
Oh, there we go.
There we go. Okay, sorry.
That's all right.
Hi.
So, how are you today?
I'm well.
Good.
Singing Bob Dylan songs after seeing the movie.
Oh, you will not stop singing them for quite a while. And every time you see Timothy Chalamet, you're going to go, "Oh, it's Bob Dylan," but it's not really.
Yes.
So, what I liked about that fact is he was practicing when he was making Dune 2. He was in his trailer. He was practicing the guitar and learning how to play the songs. So he committed really well. It's a good movie. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, please?
Yes, I've had a varied professional background. I have a master's degree in environmental studies with specializing in wildlife. I've worked out west for the Great Bear Foundation. I've taught graduate school classes in wolf ecology in Yellowstone. I taught environmental ethics, wildlife ecology, and ecology at Burlington College before they closed for several years. I worked at ECHO at the Leahy Center for Lake Champlain, creating exhibits, doing a lot of educational programs. I worked for National Wildlife Federation as Women in Conservation Coordinator and as a Smartwood Associate. Let me think what else. So those are my ecology, environmental. That's my background there. And I most recently worked at the McClure Miller Hospice Center in Colchester. I worked on inpatient psych. I've worked for Spectrum Youth and Family Services for 10 years, delivering programs with Department of Corrections and probation to people who committed violent crimes. So a varied background, but my true love has always been wildlife and nature and the outdoors.
Great. And how did you hear about this position and why are you interested in it?
Well, I think, national, pardon me. I'm really frightened but I feel like I can have input locally. And also Ted Really's been bugging me for a couple of years to do something with the town. So I feel like it's an opportunity. I also feel like I have a lot of ideas, a lot of energy and passion for this work. My passions are probably a bit different than many people who are on the council. I guess I also see it as being somewhat siloed. And for me, this topic of natural resources would cross every department in the city and basically looking at everything with an ecological lens. And I don't think that's really done much at all in the world. So that would be, I feel like, my strength.
Okay, cool. And have you attended any of the meetings yet?
I have not.
Okay. And are you aware how often they meet and for how long?
Yes.
And you
Yeah.
have the time in the evenings for that?
Yeah, Wednesdays 6 to 8 or
Okay.
something like that.
Do you have any, is there something that you think is something that the city needs to work on that's a burning issue right now, apart from burning things, but
I guess to me, it's just like the constant taking away of nature and land with development. And I see the way developments are done and they look like total clear cuts. And then I think that once they're developed, doing more planning around not just having it be monoculture, and even with the cities, the lands the city manages, like around the skating rink, even around the airport, instead of just having monoculture lawn, creating more habitat diversity for different insect species, butterflies, birds, since we don't really have that many large mammals. Also, I see walking around my neighborhood, the black boxes of rodenticide. And there was just a study done on the fishers in Vermont. 100% of the fishers trapped and tested had rodenticide in them. So, I mean, that's pretty frightening. And again, the whole lawn care management and land, it's pretty much lawn management. I just think has a lot of room for improvement, and that the city mows so much, but keeps it all in a monoculture of grass. Those are some things I'd be really interested in working on, and having developments take into account, like, so when we build these houses, what are we going to do with the land surrounding it, and how can we enhance that as much as possible?
Okay. Does council have some questions?
I don't have questions, but I just want to say, Gene, I applaud you, agree with you, and I think you would be a great addition to the committee.
Thank you.
Go ahead,
Hi,
Lord.
Gene. I was just, it's nice to see you again. And I was just going to ask the same question of you, if you're aware of or have followed what's happening with the development of a parks master plan and an open space master plan for the city, and how you would see engaging in that, or what your thoughts are around that.
Yeah, I have not read it. I think I know pieces of it. My input would be to have as little hardscape as possible. And I think the whole recreation thing, I mean, I get it's great. And I think South Burlington is just doing a lot with recreation. But I pay a lot of attention nationally to recreational impacts. And out west, I mean, places are just being pounded with recreationalists who have zero care about the environment. So I guess in looking at any development, again, for recreation, to look at the impacts and to have as minimal impact as possible. And again, to just increase as much habitat diversity. There are other species that live amongst us. I mean, I back up right to I-89 and I hear every single car that goes by, but I have gray foxes sometimes in my backyard. I've had owls, hawks. I hear raccoons screaming. So I guess to just, again, take in the voices of all the species that aren't human into the planning and see how we can enhance the world for them besides just humans, as we take as much as we can get anyway. I don't know if that really answers the question, but.
It's a great answer. Thank you.
Elizabeth, any questions?
Sure. Jean, nice to meet you. Thank you for applying, and your background is incredible. I just had a question on, it's hard for me to tell from your background, but have you had experience, or would you describe your experience working more as a sole contributor, or can you give me some examples where you've worked on a team toward a common goal? Thanks.
Yes. My job at Spectrum that lasted 10 years, which only ended because Spectrum had been funding it on their own and the state wouldn't contribute, so the job ended. But that job was 100% teamwork. I mean, I was on the domestic violence task force for representing Spectrum for the state and in Burlington meetings, monthly meetings. And that whole job was about teamwork, working with probation officers, having team meetings all the time about what's going on with the people we were working with. I mean, Echo was working on a team with everybody in the building. Let me think other jobs. Working on inpatient psych on the floor to maintain safety was totally about teamwork.
Yeah, those are great examples. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Gene, do you have any questions for us? Oh, do you want to say? Oh, Mike has a question for you. Hold on.
Thanks.
Sure.
Hi, thank you so much, like everyone else, for stepping up and volunteering. This is what drives the city. Just to be consistent, ask you the same question I asked the previous Francis is, how do you see the city in terms of the role of the committee and the objectives that you laid out playing out across the city in an equitable way?
Yeah, I think a lot about this because I am not a wealthy person. If I mention how much income I have a year, you would say, how do you do it? So, and I back up to the interstate, so I do not live in a pristine environment. I have very minimal land myself, but I care greatly about any land that's preserved. But when I look over around the airport at all the non-expensive houses that were torn down, all it is monoculture. So I would put more community gardens and community wildlife habitat gardens in places there for people in those neighborhoods, because I don't feel like they have much there. So to me, that would be more equity because there isn't land there like there is in the Southeast Quadrant. But the city could still be doing things there that enhance people's access to nature. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a wealthy person. I mean, I have some income, some savings, but I live on minimal, and I don't experience that as a hardship. I experience it as my parents taught me not to waste anything, and I've never been interested in money, but all my jobs mattered to me. Like they were about doing something to either help the world or other people.
Thank you, and that commitment of making the place a better, the world a better place definitely comes through on your resume. Thank you.
Gene, do you have any questions for us?
I should probably watch a meeting. I started to watch one, but I'm not a very formal person. And I haven't experienced it in the meetings there, but I watch Burlington City Council meetings a lot because I just find it interesting. And just some of the formality is not my gig, but I don't imagine that the Natural Resources Committee would probably have that.
Yeah, I don't think they do have recordings.
No, I mean like the formalities of counselor this or titles here or there.
Everybody shows up dressed in a tuxedo. It's a pretty.
I mean, there is a chair, and it's it's run in accordance with normal like Robert's Rule of Order, motions and things.
Yeah, and it's a relatively informal setting, and there's a lot of opportunity for contribution.
Great.
So we don't have any other questions for you, but we thank you for applying. And we have other people to interview, and so there won't be a decision made for at least a couple weeks, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Hey, take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Next up is Jessica Winkle. Winkle? Weichel. Now I got it. Come on down.
You need to push the button so that the green light turns on.
Bright green.
Can you hear me?
That's good. Why don't you pull it forward closer to you a little bit? So tell us about yourself, please.
Sure. So I currently work at UVM in the forestry program. My background is in forestry, and I manage the land that UVM owns. And I also teach classes. I teach a class on forest management and a class on wildfire. I've been in Vermont for about 5 years, and been in South Burlington, kind of settled down for just a little bit over a year. I have really strong interest in kind of getting people out in nature, learning about the natural world, connecting to what's around us. And yeah, since I kind of settled in South Burlington, I've been looking for ways to get more involved in the community, and this seemed like a really good kind of match with my background and interests, and the position was open. But yeah, prior to being in Vermont, I worked as a forester in Massachusetts and Connecticut. So I've worked for cities as well as private landowners, with just kind of an overarching theme of connecting people to land, helping them kind of understand what's going on, understanding rules and regulations, and yeah, getting people outdoors.
So have you walked around Red Rocks and identified every species of tree and tagged it such that,
I've spent many hours walking around Red Rocks. I love it there.
isn't it a nice spot?
Yeah, it's
How
amazing.
about Wheeler? Have you walked around Wheeler a fair amount?
Yeah, also an amazing spot.
Have you walked through the Great Swamp off of Midland?
I haven't.
Oh, that's another spot. Somebody will have to show you where the hidden entrance is.
Ooh, yeah.
Have
I
you
love that.
identified the 400-year-old white oak in
In
Red
Wheeler?
Rocks?
In Red Rocks? Yeah. Pretty amazing spot.
So, have you served on any committees in any other communities you lived in before?
Yeah, I was on a tree committee in the town of Great Barrington, Massachusetts. It was about 10 years ago now. I was on the committee for 3 years and the chair for 1 year. It's a pretty small town compared to South Burlington, about 7,000 people, but we consulted on like a Main Street redevelopment project and helping them come up with like a diverse street tree plan. And then as part of my role, we became a Tree City USA. So did all of the steps necessary to make that happen and maintain it for a few years. And that committee also, we got a grant to plant some additional street trees kind of after the Main Street redevelopment to catch the rest of the town up to where we were.
Remind me. Go ahead.
Not to steal you away from the council, but just to put out there that we are looking for a city arborist as in a full-time employee. Just saying.
Could do both.
yeah, and then keep my full-time job, But that's great to know. It's yeah.
Pass it on to your friends.
Yeah, I will.
This is our second full-time job. Remind me where Great Barrington is. Is it
It's-
near the Rhode Island border?
No, it's in Western Mass. It's
Western
on
Mass,
it's on the
okay.
New York and Connecticut. Well, not on, but close to the New York and Connecticut
okay,
border.
okay.
So
I didn't. There's a Barrington, Rhode Island, right?
yeah, there is.
So
Yeah.
it's right near the Mass border as well. So I was just curious. Okay.
Yeah, no, other end. That's like very, very, very southern Vermont if you just keep going straight south from here.
Have you attended any of the NRCC meetings at all?
I haven't.
And you know the frequency with which they meet?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody want to ask some other questions?
I'd love to. I asked the other candidates about the open spaces and parks master planning process that is happening, and I'd throw that out to you as well, what your thoughts are around that. But I'm curious, with your forestry background and you having spent some time in South Burlington, what your perspective is about what we're doing well and what we could do better, and just your overall sense of South Burlington and development versus land preservation versus forestry and open space, et cetera. Just your take.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm not super familiar with that master planning process, so I'll kind of answer the question more generally. South Burlington's growing really fast. I mean, in the five years I've lived in this area, even I've seen it grow really fast. And I think South Burlington has been doing a good job of like maintaining a lot of the open spaces and kind of making them accessible and available. But I also think that like we could do more. It took me a long time to find Wheeler Nature Park, and it's a pretty amazing resource. So in kind of developing a master plan, I think it would be great to kind of think more about accessibility and also like not just getting people to the sites, but getting them out to kind of learn more about them and create like a community that as a whole is better values what we have there. But I mean, there are like awesome trail maps. I think they're well maintained. It looks like people kind of stay on the trails and respect the site, and that's kind of not easy to do, especially when there's a lot of people around. So it's been really nice to see that. I mean, I think that for like city public areas, like mostly hands-off management is good. I know there have been some efforts to like control invasive species at Wheeler, and I think that that's a great way to like get people connected to the park and also do something that's good for it. So I think kind of looking for opportunities to, whether it's like trail work, invasive species management, other improvements, to kind of look for ways to have that be a community effort and help people take kind of ownership and pride in those spaces. I think, yeah, making sure to kind of keep your eyes out for those gems of open space that are vulnerable to development and looking for ways to protect them and make them accessible is valuable. I know it's a tricky balance with like housing in the area, which is also a need. So yeah, I don't know quite how you find that balance, but I think like in any long-term planning process, really thinking hard about, why people want to live here. And some of that is open space. So kind of splitting the difference between the two, I guess.
Thank you.
Mike, question?
Yeah, I think you heard my question to the previous, just trying to be consistent. Some parts of the city lend themselves to open space, but not everyone has the same good fortune to live in those parts of the city. How would you see the role of the committee in trying to create a more sort of equitable, you mentioned access, but our previous candidate mentioned, sort of micro. How do you see making nature more accessible to all aspects of our community?
Yeah, I mean, I'll reiterate the access point just because I think it's valuable, because there are some areas where there isn't a lot you can do, right? You can't add a park where there's no open space, but adding, and I think that the city does great with like bike paths and sidewalks, but there are also still opportunities to make it so people can get places. I know public transportation is incredibly tricky in this area, but I don't know that's an avenue that would make sense, but it's also something that's on my mind a lot as someone who uses it to commute to work. Other than that, taking whatever small spaces you can and making them a little bit more natural or a little bit more accessible I think can go a long way. You can do a lot with a small lot just by like building a pollinator garden or teaching people how to put a pollinator garden on their own property, and kind of building a corridor. I've heard of some kind of cool projects that, if the space isn't there, encouraging homeowners or landowners to kind of make their natural spaces a little bit more natural. I mean, yeah, the previous interview had a great point about like lawn grass is, some people really like the way it looks, but it's not ecologically the best thing. But people like lawns. But yeah, I mean, kind of rather than thinking about overhauling the whole system, just saying like, okay, can we make, a 10 by 10 square a mini park or more ecologically accessible or adding garden plots. But yeah, kind of tailoring solutions to the space you have. If you get set on really wanting like a huge park in a community where you can't put one, you won't make any progress. But if you kind of look at what's available and work within those boundaries, hopefully you can make like incremental steps that have value for people.
Do you have much experience with emerald ash borer management strategies?
Some, yeah. I mean, I work more on the like forest side, which doesn't always apply in cities, but I'm familiar with all of the kind of pesticide management techniques and the costs and the trade-offs. And there are, it's a tricky situation. Like there's a lot of value in saving them, and also it's.
And what is your most hated invasive species? That's what I want to know.
I think I would have to say Japanese knotweed, but it varies. Like if I'm walking through a barberry patch, it might be barberry.
Do you carry pruning shears with you wherever you go when you go on walks?
I left him at home today. That was pretty snowy. But yeah, no, I try to turn it off sometimes, but it's hard. Usually I'm always looking at the trees and thinking about them, even when I'm driving. So I guess don't tell anyone that.
Elizabeth?
No, I think I'm good. Thank you. Again, incredible background. And just to let you know, Tim does carry pruning shears.
Okay. Good. I'll try to track you down if I forget mine.
It's on my bike, right? So when I'm biking around, it's like, especially overhanging trees right in your face. And anyway. So Andrew, did you have some questions?
No, just to say, wow, another embarrassment of riches for the city council for the Natural Resource Committee.
Great. Well, we certainly thank you for. And how did you hear about this opening?
I'm on a couple of the email lists for the city.
Oh, okay.
Like events and things.
Good.
And, I saw the opening.
So our communication channels worked.
Yeah.
That's great. Do you read the other paper every week?
Only sometimes.
Sometimes. Well, as we tell everybody, it's full of a lot of interesting information, and there would have been an ad as well, probably in there. But
okay.
She read City News. That's better than.
No, well, I know, but there's there's city generated media, and then there's like independent media. So, but it's good to check both because you'll find out other things. So.
All right.
That's an inside joke from a long time ago. Totally irrelevant. So. Well, Jessica, thank you very much for applying, and it'll be a couple weeks before people find out. And you'll find out one way or the other.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thanks for coming out on this snowy day.
I live around the corner, so it was a short walk.
And Noah Hoffman was online, right? Noah, are you there? Can you turn on your camera?
Yes, I am here.
You have the word invasive
And
species in your title.
let me get my camera on. I do not use, oh, there we go. Okay. I'm not accustomed to using Zoom. I use Microsoft Teams for work. So it took me a second there. Hi,
Hi, how are you?
good.
Good. So I have to disclose that I think Noah and his family were friends on Facebook. Yeah. Okay. So just so you know, probably going back to 2016 or so. So thank you for applying. It's really great. You want to give us some background information on yourself?
Sure. Yeah. So like I said, my name is Noah Hoffman. I've lived in South Burlington for about 12 years. Own a home in the Laurel Hill neighborhood. Back my kids all went to Orchard School and middle school and high school and beyond. So yeah, raised my family here. This is would be my first sort of foray into volunteering for the city, other than coaching youth sports, stuff like that. I have out of my 4 kids, 3 of them are out of the house now. We just have one school-age child, so have a little more capacity in my life to do more civic involvement. Another area where I actually did some volunteering for the city before is I'm a graduate of the Vermont Master Naturalist Program, the South Burlington chapter, and I wrote up a landscape assessment of the Great Swamp area back in, gosh, I guess it was like 2018. So I don't know if that's like a document that you can find anywhere in the city's resources or anything like that, but hopefully it was something that went into the sort of the identification of the sensitive and sort of high priority habitat block of that area. So that's kind of some personal background in terms of professionally. My job title is Invasive Species Coordinator. I work for the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources. In particular, I work for the Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation, and I'm part of the Forest Health Program. So I have a statewide role. I do statewide natural resource management with invasive species focus. Sort of like the last applicant, I have a background in forestry, and I do a lot of adaptive forest management on state lands for tree pests such as emerald ash borer, as well as invasive plants. So a lot of landscape scale restoration work, and sort of with the approach of managing the forest, managing the landscape, as opposed to just managing the pest. A lot of my work has to do with building in forest health and resilience strategies into long-range management plans on state lands, as well as making recommendations to the private lands program side of the forest division. Also, I work with other agencies and the public to manage and communicate invasive species information using the best available data. I do aerial surveys with my program, create maps and other resources to help people know what's going on the landscape. I sit on a couple statewide committees, the Forest Pest Advisory Council, the Vermont Invasive Exotic Plant Advisory Council, to make recommendations to the Agency of Agriculture to identify species that should be on the noxious weed list and do risk assessments for those species using USGS maps, other tools. And I work with many organizations to help them decide on management decisions to do things like improve wildlife habitat, control invasive species, and help community organizations and at the municipal level to set objectives, kind of when it comes to invasive species management and how to just how to kind of coordinate projects on the ground, work with contractors, and I also manage or help manage the VT Invasives website, which is a project with FPR and UVM extension that just is a sort of a wide-reaching public resource for all kinds of things like Emerald Ash Borer information, and so kind of constantly have my sort of many irons in the fire with natural resource management around the state.
That was a pretty deep resume. Thank you.
Anything you don't do with
sorry,
natural
that was a little-
resources?
I meant to do a little bit more of a nutshell than that.
So you're familiar with how often the committee meets, and you can commit that to that time?
Yep.
Have you attended any of their meetings yet?
I haven't. I've looked at, well, actually I have, but it's been a few years. I've looked into sort of a, I guess, not a super in-depth. I've sort of scanned the city plan 2024 and looked at some of the key principles and the recommendations that the committee made.
And do you have any burning challenges you think the city has right now from a natural resources point of view that interests you to agree that you want to bring it forward to the committee?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm interested, in looking at the committee's recommendations for climate and climate change and thinking about natural carbon storage in soils, wetlands, forests, etc. I think where I have some strengths to offer and an interest is, when we often think about sort of master planning and that sort of high level planning, we talk about open space conservation, things like that. And we often, and this happens on all sorts of high level planning, like statewide, where we have initiatives to, maybe set objectives for, open space conservation, things like that. And I think where I have an interest in some skills that really could help identify not just how much space we're conserving, but also like what are we going to do with that space and how are we going to manage it from a natural resource perspective, and balancing various interests when it comes to recreation. And when it comes to things like engaging the community in, understanding the value of wildlife habitat, understanding the value of, sensitive wetland areas, sort of, and just thinking about like, how are we actually going to manage that land? I think that, one of the things I have some background in is working with municipalities who are able to get various grant funding to do invasive species, invasive plant management. And so I think, I'm interested in sort of drilling down deeper into those, into those conserved open spaces and thinking about how we're going to manage them. And in terms of climate resiliency, in terms of biodiversity, in terms of invasive species control, which kind of touches on all of those things, and also increases recreational value.
Great. Andrew, do you have some questions? I'll reverse the order of.
I really don't. I'm just in absolute awe of the qualifications of all our candidates, including just amazing.
Any other questions from counselors? Yes.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Elizabeth's good. Mike?
Yeah, just to be consistent with all the candidates, I think you heard my question to the previous ones. There are parts of our city that really lend themselves to conservation. There are other parts that are not. The goal is to provide access to those who live in different parts. But also, is there anything that can be done in those part of the cities that, from your perspective, that just don't naturally lend themselves, but everyone wants the same sort of ability to escape and just step into nature?
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question, and I appreciated the previous responses. Um, there are sort of higher level, bigger picture things, right? Like improving public transportation and physical access to parts of the city. The Great Swamp area, it used to be called the Underwood Parcel, and I know that was kind of a contentious name change thing, but I could see parcels like that have scenic, ecological, recreational value. I can see them being maybe publicized, highlighted more as walkable areas, just to improve access and improve like public interaction with some of those areas. But I also think I have quite a bit of experience using Vermont conservation design and working with folks at Fish and Wildlife who developed the Biofinder and Natural Resource Atlas. And and one of the things that's really special about this area is even though we have fragmented wildlife habitat and sort of our sort of connectivity is fragmented, we also have a lot of rare and special habitat and natural community types. And even within our fairly highly developed area, we have a richness in biodiversity that is actually sort of more a higher priority than in other parts of Vermont where you might have larger habitat blocks. So I think there's a lot of backyard nature, and I could see something like, I'm sort of engaged with a lot of web resources and things like iNaturalist, and I could see having more of a presence, having more of a website presence, getting folks, people are on their phones these days, providing either signage with QR codes or something on our website, or putting things in the other paper where people could engage with a South Burlington specific iNaturalist project, mapping biodiversity in your backyard or something like that, and just getting people really connected with what's right around them, even if you don't live in the southeast quadrant or something like that. There's a lot of nature to experience and observe, and I just think that we could do a lot more with making already existing digital resources available. The libraries become a great hub of all sorts of cool resources for people. So, I could see doing more digitally in ways that would actually get people connected to the landscape around them.
Thank you very much. We're kind of low on time because we have,
Sure.
yeah. So,
Just a quick, you actually stole my question.
Sorry.
So I'm almost done.
I'm sorry. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I know, it was totally unfair, but it's nice to meet you, Noah. And I'm just curious quickly if you have a sense of particular challenges or issues facing South Burlington with regard to natural resources and conservation, and how those might tie into the development of the open space and parks master planning process.
Yeah. I think, climate resiliency has been identified as, one of the key principles. And, there's a lot we can say about, promoting these resources, recreational space, so, things like that, carbon storage in forests and things like that. And I think this kind of ties into what I was saying before about drilling down into how we're going to manage those spaces. There's it's kind of the world I'm living in, but there's quite a threat of invasive plants, especially in more open, highly disturbed areas where we could really, where a lot of our biodiversity is at risk. And I think we could do better with, you know, not just comprehensive, not just high level planning, but doing projects on those municipal lands that we have and engaging with landowners potentially also. So I see that as something that that could be part of the planning process. And I think there's always the question of what are we conserving and for who, you know, so the inclusive, you know, fair and just equity part of things, I think is a real challenge because we have a lot of inequity when it comes to access to our open spaces and recreational areas and that the richness that's available. So, you know, I kind of already highlighted some ways that I was thinking about engaging with people, but I think it's just that's a big challenge is access and providing a walkable, bikeable, sort of less automobile centric infrastructure that could support you know, more access. There are no easy answers there, but those are certainly big issues in my mind.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
No, we have a time constraint, so we're going to move on from here to another agenda item, but thank you for applying. We'll be back to you in a couple of weeks. Do you have any quick questions for us procedurally, or?
I don't think so. I when I applied, I think there were a couple different terms available in terms of like an 18 month or a 2-year. And I was curious about which sort of how that works.
So once we have more candidates than seats available in this particular round of appointments, so once the council interviews all the candidates and discusses those, and then an open session makes a decision, they will determine who goes into what term.
Okay, all right. And am I correct that it's an 18-month and a 24-month term? Those are the options.
If Andrea told you that, I'm sure that is accurate information.
Okay.
So
All right.
Thank you, Noah.
Yep. Thank you.
Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
Take care.
So we're going to move on now to item 6, which is discussion and possible action, receive and accept the FY24 audit from R.H.R. Smith with John Boulay from R.H.R. Smith and Company, CPAs.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Good afternoon. Sorry, we're a little bit behind. Can you hear us okay?
That's fine. Yes, I can.
Okay.
So before John,
can you I don't know the Town Meeting TV's guy's name. Can you show all of the videos on the screen? Thank you.
All right. Well, if you can hear us, I appreciate you guys having us here today.
Sorry, John,
Hey,
hold
John.
on a
you
second.
know,
Hold on a second.
okay.
Martha, go
I
ahead.
was just going
Sure.
to do a little introduction before you could go on. I just wanted the council know that. So when we closed out the year back in September, we told you what the surplus would be for FY24. That number has not changed. It stayed at 1.3, which is what we projected and what the audited financials report shows. And out of that, you had also funded one-time projects with the surplus from FY24 and backed with FY25 budget. There were also a few other items that you had funded with the fund balance, and those were listed in the memo that was attached for you, which resulted in a 1.2 million out of the surplus. And out of that, you had also put back the amount that you had initially allocated to fund the financial system into the surplus, which resulted in only you allocating 947 of the surplus, which increased what remained in the fund balance. And John is here today, I think, just Andrew and Tim were here last year. Miranda presented the audit, and R. Smith has been our audit for a few years, and they go through the audit rotation process, and each will have one audit manager for at least 2 or 3 years, and then we'll get a new person. And this year we have John, who did our audit with few staff from R. Smith, and John is here to present the financial statement. There is a lot, and you have the hard copies in front of you. He will summarize it, and when you have questions, he will be there to answer them for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha.
Awesome. Thank you, Martha. So I can get started if you'd like.
Sure, please.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you guys having us here today. Like Martha said, this is my first year as the audit manager. I completed the audit field work a couple months ago. Also with me is Heather Hunter, our audit director. She'll be kind of listening in. So I'm going to share my screen right now. So let's see if I can do that. Let's do that right there. Okay, can you see the copy of the financial statements here?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so let me see if I can hide that. All right, so these are the financial statements. I'll keep this short and sweet. What I like doing is I like going through the major statements and then maybe talking on a couple of the notes later down in the audit. So if we start right here, statement C, this is on page 17, page 21 of the PDF. This is your balance sheet for your major governmental funds. You've got your general fund, TIF, capital improvements, and then your other governmental funds, this column right here, those are in a separate schedule further down, kind of closer to the end of the audit. I reviewed last year's audit, and the only thing that stood out was this TIF district bond proceeds. So, the general fund is very similar to last year. Capital improvement, very similar to last year. And the number I really like looking at down here is this 41,000. This is the total fund balance in all your governmental funds. So if we take this 41 less the 18, that TIF district got those bond proceeds for the bonds. So we'll see that later down in the audit. A couple pages down is the income statement for these major governmental funds, set up the same way as the balance sheet. Here you can actually see the prior year fund balance in comparison to the current year. So FY23 versus FY24. This year, $500,000 net surplus. That's just us taking the revenues less the expenses. And then, back on that balance sheet, that 18 million, we can see that right here, debt proceeds. So I actually made a little note here as well. There's a total net change in fund balance of, an increase to fund balance of $19 million. Let me delete that really quick. So what I did is I took it out, I took out that bond proceed just to see, okay, roughly $520,000 of, a fund balance increase, less the debt proceeds there. All right. The next statement I want to talk about is down a little further, page 21 of the audit, 25 of the PDF. Statement of net position, proprietary funds. So, your rec programs, water department, water pollution, and then stormwater utilities. I really didn't have any major notes on this section. There really weren't many significant changes from prior year. I did note, the fund balance did increase if we scroll down one more page 22. The same thing here, this is the income statement for those enterprise or proprietary funds. Right over here, $1.6 million increase. Revenues less the expenses. And I said, it was about the same as last year. Last year was about 1.8 million. This year is about 1.6. So, very, very similar to a prior year. And then we can see down here again, 1.4 million. That's the change in fund balance. So you go from 33 to 34.8. right. The next piece, so that kind of takes care of those statements at the very top of the audit. You know, you can see we're only on page 22 here. I'm going to scroll down to page 43 in the audit, 47 in the PDF. You know, this is where we get into our notes. You know, our note disclosure is basically describing more in detail of those statements that we previously looked at. So the first note, quick one, long-term debt. You know, the only thing new is this new bond payable in the TIF fund. You know, that's pretty much it. You're normally making your payments to the bonds, notes payable, this lease liability. And then, you know, the water department also has a bond payable. So, you know, nothing new other than that TIF fund. And if I just scroll down one page, page 44, you can actually see the description of that TIF bond right there. So, you know, you won't be starting to pay until 2028, churn 2037. So I'm going to skip ahead now to page 47. It's another major note. So notes 11 through 15, you know, detail the fund balance. So any restricted, so you got your restricted debt position right there. Non-spendable, which is made up of your inventory prepaids and any non-major special revenues there. Restricted, you got your TIF funds right here, is it 17 million. Committed fund balances, and all these non-major special revenue capital projects, permanent, all these schedules, you know, I'll show you later. They're kind of at the end of the audit. You know, those 6 or those 5 notes are, you know, ones that I really like looking at to kind of break out the fund balance. Because if we were looking at the balance sheet, it's just one big number. Here you can see them broken out. All right. So next, I'm going to page 71. This is a budget actual, schedule 1. You know, I was looking at this and I did see some overspent budget lines. You know, at the end of the day, the bottom line is, you know, you received more revenues than you anticipated. You know, you spent a little more money than was budgeted, but the revenues exceeded the expenses by 424,000. Whoops. I'll close that. So, you know, if you take the 16 less the 12 there, that's your 424 right there. Let's see. So this is kind of the summary. You've got your revenues amount available for appropriation, then your expenditures here, charges. A little further down, page 80, you know, it breaks it out. It breaks out the revenues and it breaks out the expenses. So this first one is the revenues, general fund revenues. We can see that 1.6 there, and we could see, you know, where exactly you had over-received or under-received, and the same with expenses. You know, on page 81, this is where we can see what was over-expended or what was under-expended, you know, fire department, police department. So that's that. You know, the last couple things down here, these are the schedules that I was referring to in that fund balance note, Schedule C. This is the summary of your non-major governmental funds, special revenues, capital projects, permanent funds. So, you know, I'm not going to go through every single one, but if we scroll down, so that was the balance sheet. This is the income statement. Then it breaks it out by fund. So we've got our fund numbers there. You know, you can see each separate special revenue. If I scroll down a little bit, just want to get to capital projects, you know, so we do the same thing. We break it out, the fund numbers on top, so you can see more detail. So that is the audit in a nutshell. The last piece of this puzzle is the single audit. You know, last year we tested 3 federal grants. This year we tested 1, which is the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds. You know, you can see that it was an unmodified opinion, no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies, nothing out of the ordinary was found. Low risk auditee, no financial statement findings, no question costs. So it's a clean single audit. And then the last piece is the management letter. I went back and forth with Martha on it. You know, this year there is a no comment management letter that's out. So, you know, congrats. Everything seemed very, very tight. You know, the test work, disbursements, receipts, you know, the policies that are in place are being followed. And, you know, I didn't find any deficiencies in the internal controls. So that's kind of my spiel. I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Martha. And thank you, John.
Yes, all credit to Martha and her team.
And her team, right?
It's just wonderful.
Yeah, a high degree of cooperation there probably is needed, right? To transmit, to gather data for you, transmit it to you, and then have you analyze it, right? So we've always had good reports in the past about the rapport between the city team and the auditor team. And I know that's really important for successful audits usually, right?
Yeah.
So great. So
yeah,
go ahead.
You know, I will add that Martha's been very helpful in this process. You know, I was able to come over from Newport, Vermont for a few days, and you know, Martha was very helpful. If there was something that I needed after the fact, she would send it to me. She would upload it. Everything is, you know, on a secure upload link. So yeah, it went very well. You know, I didn't see any major issues that were no red flags, nothing like that. So I appreciate it.
Are there any recommendations at all?
So the management letter, you know, I did have a comment on there to begin with. It was an outstanding checks comment. I talked to Martha about that. You know, even though there are outstanding checks on the bank reconciliation that are over 6 months, you know, Martha is reaching out to the state and reaching out to those, you know, customers, vendors about cashing those checks. So, you know, she's following the procedure, the proper procedure and the policy surrounding that. So I ended up taking that off. But, you know, other than that, I don't have any other recommendations related to like internal controls. You know, the balance sheet accounts are being reconciled, which is great. You know, it's an auditor's favorite thing to see the balance sheet being reconciled. So, you know, I don't at the moment. You know, if I went through it again in depth, you know, maybe I could find something. But I think Martha's running a tight ship over there, so I've got nothing.
Great. So those checks don't say invalid after 6 months? Darn it. Elizabeth has to leave. Do you have any questions?
I do not. Thank you. Thank you, Martha. Thank you.
Yep.
Questions from other counselors?
I just have one quick comment. Something that I learned about today, and I think Andrew learned about today, looking at the restricted positions. It was interesting to learn about the aviation fund, which has had at the end of the year $878,000, which came from the sale of fuel, aviation fuel, and those are funds that we hold that can be used for airport improvements. And I never knew we had that. It was amazing to find that out. So something new every day.
Mike, questions?
Actually, I have just a thank you very much, and I'm very reassured that you've given us our financial people such a thumbs up. I mean, that's important as we go to voting for the budget, that there's a vote of confidence that the money spent by the city is being spent well, or at least being tracked and monitored correctly. I just have one question. I guess it's more for, I don't know if it's for Martha or Jesse. You know, over expenditure, or not over, I guess expended it $400,000 more than the budget. I was just wondering what's driving that. Well, you know, I'm sure it's a decision that we approve, but I'm just out of curiosity. I mean, that's pretty on target budgeting, and to only come up with a budget that size, $400,000 more than you had anticipated.
So yes, so how the budget is tracked, expenses are approved during the budget process based on the budget line. But my green light is on, but okay. But at the end, it's just the bottom line that matters the most. So we go through the budget. If the one budget line is going to be overexpended, then we look through to see are there going to be lines where the budget is going to be underspent, and then that is allowed to be okay. Department head go through on a monthly basis. We generate monthly financials report, which do also come to you. Department head go through that and say, okay, we're not going to be spending much on this year on this line, and we will be overspending this budget line. And instead of going through budget adjustment, they are allowed to overspend that budget, and they spend that budget line as long as their bottom line budget is not overspent.
So,
and if the bottom line is going to be overspent, some departments do have other source of revenues coming in, like programs, recreation programs. If they are overspending, then they are also generating more revenues to spend on those programs.
So just everything Martha said is accurate. We can only do that within the authority you give us within, as Martha says, a program area. So it's within kind of the police budget. You have allocated a certain amount of money to policing. We can overspend, underspend within that. What we don't do necessarily is say, okay, we're going to overspend the police line, so we need to underspend the fire line. We don't do it across service areas. So a good example, a little but good example of this is, vacancies in the police department. We know we're going to have salary vacancy savings, so we invest that in a recruitment effort to try and get more applicants into the department.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Any other questions? Andrew, no questions? Okay. So thank you, John. Thank you, Heather. Heather, did you want to say something?
Thank you. Sorry, I was on mute. I would also appreciate or extend the appreciation for the finance team for such a working relationship that allowed us to effectively go through the audit and with relative ease. I would also congratulate the city on an unmodified or a clean opinion. That's the highest audit opinion the municipality can get. So congratulations to you. And we did issue the SAS 114 letter that talks about management estimates, things like that, but also whether there was any disagreements or anything with management. And I'm happy to say there were none. So those are all kudos to your staff and your municipality for running such an effective finance team and generating good positive numbers across your financial reporting realm.
Thank you. Here's a question, Martha. With the new systems that we're going to be implementing, will make your job easier next year to accumulate data to transfer?
It will definitely make the job easy.
Okay.
That was the goal, and that's why we went with it.
Okay, good. So I need a motion to accept this.
So Heather and John, so what, I'm just curious, it's obvious that Martha, City Staff Finance, is doing a fabulous job. What, in your experience, how often do cities not receive an unmodified? Like, where do we, how many municipalities kind of receive the kind of feedback that we're getting, relative to others?
You do see, clearly a large majority that receive that unmodified opinion.
Okay.
I think where you will see some of the distinctions is in that management letter comments that John referenced that we didn't have any, or in the single audit, whether there were findings noted in your single audit testing. That's where you start seeing some of those differentiations. Otherwise, most municipalities are doing what they should. It's just sometimes it takes a little longer to get there to the finish line.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have to help them a little bit more, and we didn't need to do either of those two things with your team.
Great, thanks.
So I need a motion to accept this audit.
So I move that we accept this audit.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous, and Sue, Elizabeth has left the meeting, just so you know, so there's only 4 positive votes. So thank you, John and Heather, very much, and thank you, Martha, for this work. Really appreciate it, and I guess we'll see you in a year.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a nice night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good
I'll
night.
pass
care.
your appreciation. It was just not my work. It's the department and all the city staff.
Great.
Very true. Thank you, Martha.
Thank you, Martha.
All right, moving on to item 7, which is other business. Do you have any other business, Andrew? Anything?
No?
Okay, then I can have and we decided to delete item 8, and we are at adjournment. I need a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Have a nice evening. We'll see you next week.